All right, let's talk about a problem that drives almost every web developer crazy at some point. You've got this huge list of data, maybe thousands or even a million items. You try to show it in your app, and everything just grinds to a halt. We're going to tackle that exact problem today and look at the surprisingly elegant solution.
So here's the game plan. First, we'll dig into exactly why these massive lists break our apps. Then, we'll check out the solution, this cool trick called virtualization. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how it works, look at some of the weird glitches you might run into, and finally, we'll help you pick the right tool for the job.
Okay, first things first. Let's really paint the picture here. You've built a beautiful, snappy UI, but the moment you feed it a big chunk of data, it just freezes. What is going on?
Look, any app that tries to render every single item in a list all at once is just doomed to fail. 1,000 items? You might get away with it. 10,000? You're going to feel that lag. But as you keep adding more, the user experience just falls off a cliff until the whole thing is totally unusable. And you know what that means, right? Frustrated users just closing the tab.
Now let's get crazy. Imagine trying to render 1 million items. Just think about that. The browser's internal map of the page, the DOM, is getting absolutely hammered with a million different elements. It just can't handle it, and your app becomes a paperweight.
So what's actually breaking? Well, it really comes down to three huge bottlenecks. First, your memory usage goes through the roof because the browser is desperately trying to keep track of every single one of those million things. Second, the initial load time is just forever. Your user is just staring at a spinner. And third, if it ever does load, scrolling is a laggy, jittery nightmare. This isn't just some abstract technical issue. This is a user experience disaster.
Okay, enough with the problems. How do we actually fix this? Let's get to the solution. It's a really clever technique called virtualization, or as some people call it, windowing.
The main idea here is genius in its simplicity. Instead of trying to render all 1 million items, we only render the handful of items that the user can actually see on their screen right now. That's it. As they scroll, we just swap items in and out of the DOM.
This is the perfect way to picture it. Your screen, your viewport, it's just a small window. It's looking out at this massive, conceptually huge scroll, but the browser only has to actually build and paint the tiny little piece it can see right at this moment.
Now that all sounds great, but how does it work? How can we only render, say, 20 items, but still have a scroll bar that acts like there are a million items there? What's the trick?
It's this really clever four-step dance. First, you listen for every time the user scrolls to see how far down they are. Then, using that number, you calculate which items should be visible. Step 3, you render only that little slice of your data. And then step 4, and this is the real magic, you create a giant, empty container that's as tall as the entire 1 million item list would be. That's what gives you the correctly sized scroll bar. Now this is where things get really interesting. How do you position that little window of items? The old school way was to absolutely position every single item. But the modern, way faster method is to wrap them all in one container and just move that container up and down using transform translate Y. This is way more efficient because it's often GPU accelerated, which is basically a cheat code for smooth animation.
But of course, nothing in development is ever that easy. Virtualization is a powerful tool, but it's not a silver bullet. It actually brings its own, sometimes really frustrating, new challenges to the table.
Check this out. This is from a real GitHub issue, but it's a classic problem. Think about a chat app. You're at the bottom reading the newest messages. As you scroll up, you expect the older messages to load in. That's a kind of reverse infinite scroll, and it's notoriously tricky to get right with virtualization. And it's not just complicated stuff like chat apps. You've totally seen this before, right? You're scrolling fast through a list, and for a split second, you see a flash of blank space or content that looks out of place. It's super subtle, but it just feels wrong.
That little visual glitch actually has a technical name, a partially presented frame. And what it really is a race condition happening right inside your browser. The part that handles scrolling is moving faster than the part that handles rendering your actual content.
So think of it like this. To make scrolling feel super smooth, the browser does it on a special high-priority compositor thread. It moves the screen instantly. Meanwhile, your React code is running on the regular and slower main thread. If your React code takes just a tiny bit too long to figure out the new items, the fast thread gets impatient, gives up waiting, and just draws what it already has, which is the old content but in the new scrolled position. That's the glitch you see.
So, knowing all these tricky little details, from chat apps to browser race conditions, how do we actually fix this without pulling our hair out? Well, we do what any good developer does.
we find a library to handle it for us. But which one?
The library scene for this stuff has a pretty cool history. It kicked off with React Virtualized, which was powerful but kind of heavy. Then, the same author created React Window as a super lightweight alternative. And more recently, a new library called React Virtuoso showed up, and it was designed from day one to solve all those annoying edge cases we just talked about.
And if we look at them side by side, the trade-offs become pretty clear. Yeah, React Window is super tiny, which is awesome, but that maintenance status column is a big deal. It's not really being updated anymore. Then you have React Virtuoso. It's a bit bigger, but it's actively maintained, and it has features like auto-sizing and that reverse scroll we needed for the chat app built right in.
And this really gets to the heart of why React Virtuoso is the go-to choice for so many people now. It was built specifically to handle the annoying, real-world problems, items that have different heights, it handles it, that chat app use case, built right in. And the fact that it's actively developed means it's keeping up with the modern web. That's huge.
So the bottom line is this. While the older libraries were amazing and paved the way, if you're building a new app today and you need a virtualized list, you should probably start with React Virtuoso. It just hits that sweet spot of features, performance, and modern support.
So you did it. You took one of the biggest performance killers in web apps, and you solved it. Your lists are blazing fast now. But that just leads to the next question, doesn't it? Now that you've fixed this bottleneck, what's the next one hiding somewhere in your code just waiting to be found?